Hello. Testing 1, 2, 3. I think that music's a little loud. I tell you, if it's not one thing, it's another. That's the way it works, though, I suppose. Alright, hey, well, welcome to the show, everybody. Tonight is For Funsies. Hey, iSoul11. And Tonnages, you're back too. It's nice to see you. What are we working tonight? Tonight's the For Funsies show. Let's see, what are we gonna do? The Azar is going to be done on the Monster Show this Saturday. I'm thinking... See, we finished up the Acolyte last Saturday. So we'll put him away. We finished up the Baboon. Let's see, and here's the Azar. Azar, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. We're gonna do him on Saturday. So let's put him in the back. I think for funsies, we're going to finish up some of these guys. I made some guards a while back, and I never finished them. Put them off to the side. And I've also got these knights up here, these other armored guards. I think we're gonna go ahead and finish these guys. I'm doing well, Isol. I'm doing good tonight. Excited to get some of these guys knocked out. Now, I think these guys, all they need is eyes. I'm so ashamed. I got right up to the end. All I needed to do is put eyes on them, and I stopped. So let's go ahead and bang these out real quick. And then we'll move on to these knights. So let's get our stuff set up. Paper. water cup. So yeah, thanks for joining the stream, Isol. Are you a D&D aficionado? Are you a player or a DM, or are you just new to the game and interested? Where do you fall on the spectrum? Alright, so we're gonna get some eyes on them. So normally the way I do eyes is I do a black blob, a white blob, and then another black blob, and it looks like I've already put the black blob on these guys. So we're gonna need some white for the white blob. I think this is, yeah, that's dried up. So let's get some white. And the eyes is one of the few times I'll actually use a stark white. This one is dead white that I'm using. Oh, player, nice. Hello, fellow player. I am a dungeon master. I've DM'd for about 5 years now. I don't remember the exact date because I kind of dabbled here and there. But I mostly DM, and these days I mostly DM. I do prefer to DM rather than play. I've played in a couple games, but DMing is where it's at. I enjoy creating all of the stuff that goes around D&D, like miniature painting and world building. And all of that fun stuff. Sorry about that. Alright, so let's get a little white blop on this guy. That is too much. Here we go. There's one white blop. Pops. Nice. Next. I like to get them in the corner of the nose. That one turned out really good. So I've always had a fascination with D&D. Now the question is, how did I get into D&D? Ever since I was a young fellow, like 10 or 11, I've always had a fascination with it. I never really understood what it was. Since you're a player, you can probably relate that D&D is a very difficult thing to explain to people who have never experienced it before. It's like, it's storytelling, but it's like a board game, but it's not a board game. And, you know, if you have zero reference, it's very, very difficult. So I didn't really know what it was, but I knew that people played it, and I knew that the people that did play it really enjoyed it. And it wasn't until I was in my late 20s, early 30s that I'd picked up some other books on RPGs like GURPS and BESM, which is like it's an anime-based one stands for Big Eyes, Small Mouth. That one was more like a homebrew thing. Not really homebrew, but like it was just like a PDF like you download online. But my initial like touchstone of D&D was with the Adventure Zone, with the McElroy brothers, and that was, you know, when 5th edition had just come out. So I'm a 5th edition baby. I haven't, you know, been through multiple editions. I never got into 3.5, though I am aware of the history. And I actually started, like, the first game I ever played, I DM'd a Pokemon game that was, I think it was based off of PTU, Pokemon Tabletop United, I think it was, with my kids. And kind of got into it with that, and then some friends at work invited me to a D&D game, and then after that I tried my hand at DMing at Starfinder, which is based off of Pathfinder, which is based off of D&D 3.5, and it, like, I really like the setting of Starfinder. I like how it's like science fantasy, it's like all space opera stuff, but it's the system is incredibly crunchy, and I really do. I forgot about the Pokemon game. I really do like the setting, but 5e just, it makes it so easy to play, and it's not so crunchy. The numbers don't get in the way, and I prefer a less crunchy game. I prefer more RP and less crunch. And yeah, I've been DMing D&D ever since. Actually, the game that Lucrum DM'd was the first time I'd ever played D&D. He DM'd it first, and then after the end of his story arc, we swapped seats, and he became a player, and I took over the DMing, and I've kind of been DMing and playing games off and on ever since. And now it is my favorite pastime. Yeah, it's a pretty convoluted story. It's not like, oh, I walked into a friendly local game store one day and someone said, hey, you want to play D&D? And I was like, sure. And then that was like it. It was like a wild ride. I always get these eyes. It's like one eye will look great, the other eye will be wonky. That one's not so bad. Just kind of looks a little cross-eyed. That's the challenge. Set him down. I'm gonna zoom this camera in because I feel like you guys can't see the eyes very well. But right now I DM 2 games. I'm a bit of a madman. I'm doing one sort of homebrew dungeon delve that Lucrum is a player in, and then I am introducing some new players to D&D from a church that I'm attending, and where are you? And they are loving it. We are 2 sessions in. This crossbow is really getting in my way. That looks okay. Not too bad. I really like this eye method. The white blob, I mean the black blobs. It's a pretty cool concept. And it's pretty easy. It works like when you there's a pen. Works like this. So you have like the eye, and when you put the black blob down, it ends up coloring it in, and then you put the white blob in the middle, and then the black blob ends up being like eyelashes around the outside, or like the shadow around the eye, and then you put the black blob in the middle, and that becomes your pupil. And you know, something like that. But you can get a little creative with it. Like you can do like your black blob and then your white blob, and then if you like put them over to the side, you connect the pupils to the outside. You know, you can make them look in different places, or you know, there's different ways you can do it. But it's pretty simple because you're just dropping dots. Grab some water. So yeah, I've been playing and DMing D&D for about 5 years or so, and but I've only been painting minis for about a year, maybe a little over a year now. And I don't consider myself a fantastic painter. I'm definitely not as good as like Miniac or Ninjon. But I'm cool with that, because my philosophy is, with painting, is I don't want to be a good painter. Like, I'm not trying to be an artist. I'm not trying to put these in a museum somewhere. I want these table ready. If it's table ready, then it's good. That's what I want. I want to be able to drop it on a table and my players to go, that's a guard. Or, that's an owlbear. Or that's a bugbear. And that's cool. I don't want them to get hung up in, oh man, the shading on that is like blah blah blah, or the, you know, yada yada. If you did edge highlighting on this, or if you know, feather that in a little bit more, it would be a so and so. I don't care about that. I can be a very lazy dungeon master. I want to invest time into the things that are going to make them and produce the most fun at the table. So having minis is fun. Anything that you can lay your hands on, whether it's physical dice, cool physical character sheets, miniatures, props, contracts, pieces of paper, puzzles, all of that stuff, all that tangible stuff is all that tangible stuff is, you know, it's fun. So I got a 3D printer a while ago because I just wanted to get into the hobby. It was like a FDM printer. And then one of my friends ended up getting a resin printer because he wanted to print like Warhammer or some sort of other tabletop game stuff, and that's kind of what got me into resin printing. He looks a little jovial. He was like, hey, how you doing, man? Just a guard out here doing guard things. Last one. Let's get rid of your ghost eyes and give you some real eyes. Ooh, you need time to think. I bet that's the grounds for an exciting story. I'm ready. I'm excited. I always love hearing how people get exposed to D&D, because it's just such a ripe field for storytelling. Okay, I think that's it. Folks. Got my eyes on the guards. Feels good to have that checked off the list. I'm gonna set these guys over on the side here. There we go. Nice. Feels good to have that done. Alright, we got a couple knights over here now. It looks like I've already got some silver on them. And they're already Xenothal highlighted. Highlit. And their models are identical, so that means we're probably going to want to put something on them to differentiate them. Like you may not have noticed, but this guy's got blue fletchings. And this guy, I think, had... Oh, no, wait. No, he's got blue fletchings. Never mind. I thought I differentiated them. Nope, they all have blue. Well, maybe I should keep in the theme then. So it looks like these dudes I used bone white with probably a seraphim sepia and then a red. And so these guys they've got chain on top and chain underneath their garment. I think probably just red. Yeah, I think probably just red. And maybe we can throw some paint on their helmet. Maybe we could do like white on the cross place and then red around the top or something like that. Something to throw some contrast on there. I might do white on the gauntlets too, and just make them not gauntlets but actual just like gloves or something. Maybe leather, maybe like a leather color. So let's go bone white. We'll use that for our white color. And then we're gonna go blood red's too bright. I'm gonna go with my dark red. And then leather. We'll need leather for the belt too. Let's do beastie brown for the wood parts of the scabbard. Hey, we're not even going to need to do eyes on these guys. That'll be nice. Yeah, it's more than just math. The funny thing is that, like, way back in the day, D&D was, like, mostly math. It was more simulation and number crunching. And, like, the story building stuff was kind of a bit of an afterthought. Like, that kind of emerged naturally from people playing D&D. Because I think storytelling is like a very basic, foundational human trait. You know, we tell stories all the time. When something exciting happens to us, we tell stories about it. You know, it's just kind of one of those things. Like, everybody loves to tell stories. You know, sitting around the campfire telling spooky ghost stories, or like when there's a holiday and you kind of recount the holidays of the past and what went on and you know, I mean, even like an inside joke is really just like story based. You know, if you were there and you know the story, then you get the joke. And D&D is really, really great like that because it tells really good stories and builds really good connections. The only thing I wish that was a little different is that I wish there was a way for those stories to be like well understood by others. Because you kind of have to be there. It's like when you when you tell somebody something that happened in your D&D game, a lot of times you have to give a lot of context, or else they like have no idea what's going on, and it can be a little, I don't know if alienating is the right word, but it's like people are like, what the heck are you talking about? I think streaming D&D games is probably a good way to get those stories out to a broader audience and to help them permeate culture a bit. Hey, Jalapeno. Welcome to the stream. Didn't realize you hopped in. Uh-oh, it looks like my chat box thing is cutting off. If y'all don't mind, I'd like to tinker with this for just a second and figure out why my chat's not reaching all the way down to the bottom. Let's finish painting this part. It's pretty important to make sure that when you're base coating like this, that the paint, like, you don't let it stop and dry halfway, or else you'll create, I don't know what the term is, but it's kind of like a crease. It'll have a line that's dried, and then when you paint over it, like one part where you paint over the line will be thicker. It won't be like even coverage. So it's important to finish the section that you're painting. There we go. Give me a second. Let's see if I can fix this. Chat. I bet I have it cropped weirdly. There we go. Strange. I wonder why I did that. Well, at least it's working. That was pretty easy too. Oh, I didn't realize that you started with a Pathfinder. I guess that was the game with Tyler. All right. So I think this red is turning out okay. Oh yeah, Pathfinder 2e came out. Pathfinder is way too crunchy for me, but I know some people very enjoy it. Very enjoy it? Goodness. Really enjoy it. I think this needs to be red. For those not aware, Pathfinder is actually based off of, I believe it's an expansion, was originally an expansion of the SRD for D&D 3.5. When Wizards of the Coast released 4th edition, like they released 3rd edition, and it was like a super success, and everybody loved it, and it was fantastic, and it was like so good that when they expanded on it, they didn't want to do away with it. They wanted, because they were, I don't know if they were like afraid that it was, like a new version was gonna bomb or something or whatever, but they just like kept expanding it to the point that it kind of became a new edition, so they called it 3.5, and everybody loved it. And then 4th edition came out, and they did some really neat stuff with 4th edition, but some of the stuff people just did not like, and since 3.5 was like so prevalent and it was just everywhere and there was so much material for it, people kept using 3.5, and there was like some licensing issues. So the SRD, I don't know what it stands for, but it's like the open sourced portions of D&D. So like the actual rules of the game are open sourced, and they're available, and you can just anybody can use them. You don't really have to pay to play D&D, because D&D is really more of a tradition than it is like a product. And so, but there are some certain intellectual properties, some IP that Wizards uses and like regulates. Hold on a second. So things like the Beholder, and they're like, I don't think the Mimic. I think the Mimic is too ubiquitous. But I know the Beholder. I think Mind Flayers, and there's some other very specific D&D monsters that Wizards of the Coast owns the intellectual property of, and they're their original creations. Because if you think about it, like a lot of D&D monsters are just based off of lore. Like an Oni, that's like Japanese lore. And so in the SRD, those ones are just like available. Like nobody can own goblins; they're in the public domain. And so what Pathfinder did, Paizo, I believe the company is they took the SRD, and then they just built their own world around it, their own lore, their own extra monsters and stuff, and it still has like a lot of the same stuff. I think owlbears are not in the SRD either. But yeah, they built all their stuff around it and essentially forked, to use an open source coding term, they forked D&D and built their own system off of 3.5, D&D 3.5, and that became Pathfinder. People disliked, well, it was a combination. They disliked 4th edition and loved 3.5 so much that it like actually spawned its own company. It's kind of crazy. I got this red out, so I'm going to go ahead and start on this other one. And that's what turned into Pathfinder. That's where Pathfinder came from. I forget where I was going with that. And I didn't live through any of that. Like I wasn't a part of the D&D culture when that stuff was happening. I just kind of have learned this stuff secondhand over the years, being into the D&D community and understanding the heritage behind it. Because it really is more of a tradition than it is a game. You know, like if you think of D&D, it's really more like checkers than it is Monopoly, to use a board game analogy. You know, Monopoly, the boards are very specific. You have to, you know, have specific cards, specific pieces, and whatever. And somebody, you know, Milton Bradley, or whoever it is, they own Monopoly. You might say they have a monopoly on Monopoly. But like nobody owns checkers. Anybody can just make a checkerboard and play checkers. And there are people that have their own homebrewed rules for checkers. You know, like, I think traditionally, when you like do a double jump with an unkinged checker piece, you can't go backwards, but a lot of people play it that way. And so, you know, checkers is kind of like a tradition, and wherever you go, you know, there's like people play it different ways and things like that. And D&D is like mostly storytelling with extra steps, and so like the tradition, like everybody's table is different, everybody's homebrewed rules are different, and everybody, like every dungeon master's style of DMing is different, and that's really cool. That's like it's like I don't know. It's a wholly unique thing, if you ask me. Need to water this red down a little bit. And I love it. It's the most fun you can have with your brain, in my opinion. Because it's just so open, it's just so flexible, and it's just so memorable. And there have been like studies on like the way that memories are stored in your head. Just like in general, when you play D&D, the things that you experience in the story are stored in your brain the same way that memories are. So at the table, you know, it just feels like crazy, silly fun and stuff. But when you remember it, like you're actually using parts of your brain, like it feels more real when you look back and remember it. And so you've got like this shared experience with everybody else at your table. And it feels really immersive. If you get that good old willing suspension of disbelief going on. Tap into that immersion. Have a good shower. Yeah, it is pretty cool. It's really unique. It's really unique. And I've kind of gotten better at explaining what it is over the years, just because I've had more experience with it. But it's like I used to be able to, like, someone would ask, "Oh, D&D, that's like that nerds game." I'm like, "Well, yes, it is, but I mean, it's not just that." And they'd be like, "Well, what is it?" And I was like, "I don't know, man. It's a thing, you know. We roll dice." And they're like, "Oh, so it's like Yahtzee?" I'm like, "No, it's not like Yahtzee. It's like, you know, we roll dice. So it's all like you're shooting craps." I was like, "No, it's like it's not like that. It's like, but it's like storytelling." "Oh, okay, so it's like is it competitive? Are there like so there's like fighting monsters, right? So does somebody lose?" It's like, "Well, no, you're kind of on the same team. So are you against the dungeon master if he's controlling the monsters?" "Well, not really. So you're pretending to fight monsters against a guy controlling the monsters, but he's not your enemy." You're like, "No, the monsters are your enemy. The dungeon master's not your enemy." Right. What? And it's just like it's super difficult to explain sometimes, because like on the surface it sounds like everybody gets a participation trophy and everybody goes home and wins, and it's like, well, that's not fun. But like that kind of happens, but that's like, it's like not always and not really, because like the stakes of the things that happen in your game are all completely dependent upon the fiction of the game. You know, it's like if you find a stray dog and someone threatens your dog and you get mad. I mean, those are like real emotions bubbling up in there. But it's like, you can't just go up to some jock or some dude and just be like, yeah, it's a game where you can find a dog and the goblins will try to kill your dog and you'll get real mad because they're trying to kill your dog. I mean, they'll just look at you crazy. The best way to explain it is that I've seen is it's almost like a combination. It's almost like a campfire story that's shared by people with rules so that people don't cheat. Because like I used to play imaginative games with my brother and sister when I was young, and it would be like, oh man, I got a rocket launcher and I'm gonna jump over here and I'm gonna shoot the rocket, and they're gonna be like, well, nuh-uh, you didn't get me because I've got a rocket launcher shield. And they're like, oh yeah, but my rocket launcher is a rocket launcher shield penetrating rocket launcher. And it just ends up being like a back and forth, nuh-uh, yeah, sort of thing. And so like, but that's essentially what D&D is it's like, it's that imaginative play. I've got a 5-foot long bastard sword. And the other one's like, well, I've got like plate armor. And so you go and get your friend who's a neutral third party, and you're like, okay, I swing at him, and he's like, okay. Instead of your friend being like, well, you just missed, now you have a neutral third party to tell you, what happens. Were you standing here when you swung? Like, which way did you swing him? Somebody to arbitrate and to lay the rules out and to make sure that it's fair. So it's essentially imaginative play that's fair. But then that arbiter, that rules arbiter in the middle, gets to also create a fiction around it and is responsible for other things. I realize that's not a simple explanation. Most times I'm just like, just watch Critical Role, or just watch, a D&D game, or hey, better yet, come to one of my games and just sit down and watch. And most times, like, it's one of those things where it's like, once people see it, they're like, oh, so that's what it is. Okay. And they'll be either like, that's not for me, or they'll be like, hey, that's really cool. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, I could have tried to tell you what this was, but you still wouldn't have got it. Not till you, like, see it in action. And just be like that sometimes. And I really like how it's gotten more ubiquitous. Like with Stranger Things, and Community did a couple D&D episodes. Community's episodes on D&D are actually a pretty accurate portrayal, although I would say that they're an accurate portrayal of like older editions of D&D. There are some episodes of what's that show, Big Bang Theory, where they play D&D, but it's more like it's more like jokes that just nerds would get, and they're pandering enough that nerds probably wouldn't appreciate them because they already know the material. So it's like, it's good jokes for not nerds, but then they're not going to get it because they're not nerds, and it's bad jokes for nerds because it's, like, they get it and they're just bad jokes. So the Big Bang ones are not particularly good examples, but like the episodes of Community have some pretty good typical player archetypes where they they find the one goblin or like gnomes or whatever, and there's the one player who's like, man, these gnomes really look like they're oppressed. We should try to free them. We should tell them to unionize. And it's like, there's always somebody who's like, oh, don't kill the goblin. I mean, what if he's just doing goblin things? And then there's like the one guy who just wants to murder, hobo everything, just wants to go off and, I haven't killed something in 15 minutes. We need to get moving. It's just hilarious. Yeah, watching their first game and their eyes just kind of light up. It's like it clicks. And it's like, sure, there's dice, but that, like, the dice is just, that adds the mystery. It's kind of crazy that there's a game where you can tell a story and that the dungeon master can kind of come up with a story, but he doesn't tell the story. Like, he's not the actor. He's not the heroes. The heroes tell the story. This is the story of the players. But the players don't know what the story is going to be. And even the guy that controls the world, even the dungeon master, doesn't know what the story is going to be because there's an element of randomness. And there, you know, it's a wholly unique thing. It's really interesting. And I love, like, my favorite part of it is not just the storytelling, but I love all of the creative pieces, the creative interlinkings of D&D. Like, there's I don't know if it's a philosophy or if it's like I don't know, but there's a thing, we'll just call it a thing, called ingress and egress that I experience a lot, just in my hobbies and in my work. And the ingress is moving in and the egress is moving out. So it's like inhaling and exhaling. And when I'm in a egress, I want to consume stuff. I want to play video games. I want to watch movies. I want to consume. But then after a while, I get tired of consuming. And, you know, I look at all the video games I've played, and I look at my Steam library of games that I haven't played yet, and I'm just like, I just don't feel like playing anything. I start flipping through Netflix, and I'm like, I spend 15 minutes looking for something to watch, and I just end up not watching anything. And I just don't want to consume anymore. I'm just done. I want to read a book. I want to draw. And so then that's kind of like an inhale. Like I'm inhaling content. And once I'm full, there's an egress. I need to let it out. I need to create something. I need to go out into my wood shop and hammer some boards together. I need to build a birdhouse. I need to write a book. I've never written a book, but, you know, I need to write something. I need to paint minis. I need to come up with a story idea. I need to do a thing. I need to get it out of me. And then once I get it all out, you know, I've got an empty tank. I don't have any more inspiration. I need something else. I need to fill back up, so I go back into that egress. So it's not necessarily burnout. It's more like satiation. It's more like getting hungry and eating and then being full and using that fullness to do something and then getting hungry again. If you keep doing it, like, that kind of is what burnout is. Like, but burnout is beyond that. So this is just kind of like a cycle that goes back and forth and back and forth. And so I consume stuff, and then I create stuff, and then I consume stuff, and then I create stuff. And one of the things that I've really appreciated about D&D is that it lets me do both. It lets me consume this story and be a part of this really enriching stuff that all these other people are creating. It's unique, it's interesting, but then it lets me, like, dump my creativity back out. I get to take that and then write and fold that back into the content. I get to 3D print minis. I get, you know, like, actually, I haven't gotten into sculpting, but I'd love to get into sculpting my own minis. I get to, you know, write and design people and like learn about backgrounds. I was making maps for a while, and, you know, I had to learn which way rivers flow, and like understanding that when there's a mountain range, one side is going to be wet and the other side is going to be dry, because when the clouds blow over the mountains, that's where it drops off its rain, and so then the clouds float down the other side and they're all dry. It's just like, I learn about so much different stuff. I learn about economics, and I learn about, you know, what it takes to run a tavern, and I, you know, just kind of like get to follow the dopamine, and it creates these mental hooks for all sorts of different stuff, and it's just like a really great blend of both. For a while, I could show you some. I was making terrain, so I've got like all of these. This is like a stone column. All these terrain pieces. This is one that I 3D printed. Here's some stone columns. I got a bunch of these. Got the idea from those from Black Magic Craft. I built an airship, and so there's just so many different aspects of things that it really fills that cycle of creating and consuming at the same time. And I find that I play a lot less video games, and I work in IT, so like I'm in front of a screen all the time. So the more that I can get away from a screen, the better. I realize that there's some irony in being in front of a screen right now because I'm streaming this, but I'm not really looking at it too much. I just kind of look at chat every once in a while. Also, it's really good. I don't have any science to back this up, but I've always felt that it's really good for the human mind to touch things with your hands, to, you know, to make things, to fashion something, and to have a physical product afterwards. Like, I like digital art, and I've got an iPad that I scribble on every now and again, but I like putting pencil to paper. I like having a physical thing. I like putting paint onto physical minis. It's very rewarding. These guys almost look like Templars or Paladins or something. I think it's the red. I'm intentionally going to leave their shields without an emblem because, first of all, I probably could paint an emblem on the front. I just don't want to. I'm kind of lazy. But I like to leave my minis generic so that I can use them for a lot of different scenarios. If I put like the holy symbol of Lathander on there, well then, I can only use them for Lathander. But these guys, I want to be able to use them for a lot of different things. Versatility. Plus I only have so much storage space and I don't want to have a box of 50 different color coordinated and guards depending upon the city that they're from. That's just madness. And if you want to go down the mad scientist route, more power to you. I'm not your daddy. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But table ready is the standard that I use. If it's good enough to drop onto a table and people know what it is and they can interact with it, it's good enough for me. That's what I'm trying to get. There we go. So now we got metal. We got some red. Now, let's get some leather on there. Why did I get this white out? Oh, I was going to do white on the faces. Yeah, I think that'll look good. Alright, let's get some metal out. Some leather out. We'll do the belts. I was actually super scared the first time I got into mini painting. I was worried that I was going to mess up and that it was just going to be terrible, and I had to put a lot of stuff in my way and lower the barrier really low just to get in because it was so intimidating. Most of the paints I use are craft paints just because they were cheap. I didn't want to sink a bunch of money into paints and then not be good at mini painting and give up on it and then have $50 in paints. I also use craft paint brushes because it's what I could find. And they work really well. The sky looks terrible, but that's okay. Because every mini looks terrible when you first start painting it. Alright. Got the leather belts. I need to figure out something for those scabbards. Any ideas? I kind of don't want, like, I think these are metal, but I don't want to do more metal. I think I'm going to do wood. I think I'm going to do this darker brown on the center of the scabbards. See how that looks. Maybe I'll do silver on them. One of the issues that I've had, or challenges that I've had with painting minis, at least in a fantasy setting, is that you need a lot of browns, because a lot of things are leather and cloth and dirty, and it can look terrible if everything's the same color. Because it's like, it's brown on brown on brown. It's like, hey, it's a guy with brown pants and a brown shirt and a brown hat. And so you kind of need some different browns to differentiate them. Well, the same thing can happen with metal. It's like, yeah, we use gunmetal for this, and gunmetal for that, and gunmetal for this, and then it just looks like a big silver blob. And so what I've found is if you want like light metal, I use this one, gunmetal. This is like my basic metal one. And then I got this silver, and it's just like a lighter one, and it works really, really well for making things, for like just differentiating parts. I think that brown looks good. Whoa, did that music get really loud for y'all? Goodness gracious. Oh, it swapped to my other song that I made, and that one was mixed louder. Sorry about that. I've been terribly sorry. I did not mean to blow everybody's eardrums out. This is new music. Well, at least you don't have heck in you. I don't have any heck in me either, because it scared the heck out of me. Is that a good level? Is that about right? Testing 1, 2. Yeah, I think that's probably a good level. I'm incredibly sorry about that. Music has been one of the big struggles of Twitch streaming. Originally I was using some copyright music, and that was like a big no-no. And then I tried using some royalty-free music, and then it ended up not being royalty-free music, and the person that posted about it lied. And that was a big no-no, and I was like, forget it. I'm just gonna make my own music. So I whipped up a couple of these tracks. I say whipped up. It was pain and suffering. It was so hard wrapping my head around this stuff. But I like the way it came out. It's very chill. There we go. Each of these tracks are an hour long, so that means since we hit the second track, we're halfway through our time tonight. Oh. But I feel like we're making good progress. I feel like we'll be able to get these guys finished. We won't have to do eyes on them, so that'll be nice. I forget what I was talking about. let's talk about guards. Guards are handy in a game. I've only had to use guards once in one of my campaigns, because normally my campaigns stay pretty rural, and you typically only have like guards in a city. But they're a good way of teaching players that society doesn't give a hoot about you being the hero of a story, and that players are not above the law. And that helps with like, you don't want to be a jerk about it, you know, if your game is really casual, but it helps with building realism in your world. You know, if you steal something, there's guards on patrol that like watch for that kind of stuff, and it's like their job. But also there's guards can be bribed, and guards are people too. You know, you just can't just kill guards and not expect consequences. They're a really good tool for that kind of stuff, for learning that and conveying that to your players. Got the belt on him. I did not get the belt on him. And I wanted to convey a couple different kinds of guards. Yeah, it is too much silver. I haven't actually put silver on them yet. This is just the gunmetal. Once I start putting some silver on, you'll see the difference, and it'll add some contrast. I wanted a couple different guards, just to use in different scenarios, because I figured having generic guards would be fine. Oh, I was talking about too much silver. I gotcha. Having too many guards, like generic guards here and there, is fine. It's perfectly doable. But I ended up getting some good models for these guys, and I wanted like a proper set of guards that I could have crossbowmen in the back, you know, drawn out, and then like these heavily armored knights up front, and having like a rank and file royal guard, I thought would be a really cool idea. It'd be like a really cool set piece to have at the table. Okay. Let's get our bone white on here, and then we'll gussy up the metal. That's a official art term, gussy up. All right, I'm going to do white on the gloves. I'm going to make them like, I'm not sure. Either make them like linen gloves, or I might put a dark wash on them and make them kind of look leathery. I might put a flesh wash and make them just look like hands. I'm not sure yet. So after we're done with these, after we're done base coating here, we're going to wash it, maybe dry brush it. I'm not so sure about dry brushing. I think this white stripe down the center is going to look really cool, though. It might not, and I might just paint over it with silver. But I kind of like, oh yeah, that kind of looks cool. I'm going to come around the side. That looks pretty neat. And let's go ahead and put white on these parts. And we'll put either contrast paint or some wash on them. Washing is when the mini starts to look good. Before then, it looks like a chalky, Crayola College mess. It's particularly chalky looking because of the craft paints that I use. Like, these are just 99-cent apple barrel paints that you get at Walmart. But they work really well. I actually bought some Vallejo like high dollar mini paint, and this bone white is one of those. These bottles here at the back, these are my Vallejo ones. These are my craft paints. I used like an Amazon gift card that I got from work and just spent $50 and bought like a big variety fantasy medieval mixture of paints. Because I was like, you know what, I've been painting for a while. I want some good paints. I want some mini paints. I'm gonna do what the YouTubers do, and I'm gonna throw money at my hobby and instantly make it better. Nope. That didn't work. A lot of those colors I don't even use. In particular, that green, that blue. I never use that orange. Good gravy, that orange is like maybe for fire every once in a while. I never use the gray. But that blue is a terrible blue. It's like all weird and purpley. I still like the blues on my craft paints, and I still like the reds. That bloody red is like way too bright to use for anything that's like not blood. And even then, like, it's really not that great for blood because it doesn't have like the texture of blood. But that just goes to show you. It's not about throwing money at stuff. So once we get these base coated on here, they're going to look chalky. And that's because of the way that light works. Light interacts with things in a very specific way. And light bends around objects and moves with objects and refracts and reflects off objects, and shadows scatter and whatnot off of objects. And when you're doing that with a small object, it looks like a small object. It doesn't look like a big object. And so one of the tricks of mini painting is you're trying to get small things to look big. You want to simulate, or at least assist the light, so that it looks like it's behaving as if this small thing were a big thing. So one of the reasons that this looks so bad is because these colors have like a matte finish on them, and when the light reflects off of them, the light doesn't get trapped in crevices, and it doesn't cast shadows, and so it makes the whole thing look really flat. It looks really two-dimensional. And so you need to simulate or give the light a little help with its shadows and its highlights to make it look like natural light, so then it appears to be more like a big thing. And there's a couple ways we can do that. As far as highlighting is concerned, one of the ways that we can do that is called edge highlighting, and you just take a lighter color and use the side of your brush and you go zoop right across the corner of like that shield there, and that's a corner, so the light should be coming down towards the top, and so it looks like you know, sunlight's hitting that. But and another thing that we can do is called dry brushing, where we take an old brush, we put a little light paint on it, or maybe some white, and we just go and scrape it across the top. And what it does is, like, imagine in between my knuckles there's going to be, you know, see how they're darker here because of the shadows, right? And then it's lighter up here on the surface. And so what you do is you just like graze the brush across the top, and it'll only touch the high parts. It won't get down in the middle. And so it like just dusts a little bit of light paint on the very edges, and it kind of brightens it up. The only downside with dry brushing is that it can make your mini look a little dusty. Because it's not a complete covering of the surface. Like you're not lightening up the value of the color of the paint underneath it. You're kind of sprinkling or peppering, almost like a dusting of powdered sugar. It's gonna make, like, if you stand a ways away, it's gonna make the whole thing look a little lighter, but it is going to look kind of dusty. I forgot to do the helmet on that last one. So that's how you can make it lighter. You can also do things like blending and where you just like use lighter paint and you mix some paint up. So your red, I could mix some red with some white and then like color that up here and just make it look lighter. That's difficult and requires a lot of skill, and I'm again lazy and interested in table ready, not works of art. So I don't do that. I will say that I did do a blending once on a cape for a hero's, like for one of my players' minis, because I wanted to try it and they thought it would look cool. Like I thought it would look cool for them. And it did look cool and it turned out okay, but I would never want to do that again. It was a ton of work. Actually, got a little bit below here. Another thing you can do, and more importantly than highlighting, is shadows. If you can get the shadows to look correct, that will go a long way. And one of the easiest ways to make shadows, fortunately, it's a very easy trick, is using something called a wash. And what a wash does is it's kind of like a thinned down paint. It's very thin, it's translucent. What's my favorite mini? Ooh, that's a good question. So, I actually have one. And his name is Rurik. He is a dwarf from one of my previous games that I was a player in. And this is him. I love him because of his face. Like, his eyes turned out really good. He looked really grumpy. I didn't make this model, and I don't even remember where I got the model. But he's my favorite. And actually, if you notice here, he's got like some battle scar damage. Like this little arrow hole and this like chop out of his shield. That was where the 3D print failed. And it just like didn't print that part, and it messed up the model. And I just kind of rolled with it, and I actually carved out up there and I scratched out up there to make the whole thing look a bit more battle damaged, and it's just a cool effect now. But yeah, his face, like the eyes, I wish I could do those eyes on every single one of my minis. They just turned out really good. I also love that he's like balding a little on the back and he has a comb over. So fun. He's probably my favorite. My second favorite, I haven't used him yet, is I have this Parrot Aracakra Ranger. I really like him a lot, and I really want to use him in a game. He's just kind of simple. Yeah, accidental details. That really rubs some humanity on stuff. It's good stuff. Trying to think if there's any others. Oh, not my super favorite. This is probably like one of my favorite monsters that I've painted. This is my beholder. This is Xanathar. And this is a 3D model that I painted and kind of modeled him off of the book. Hey, welcome back, Lucrum. That's my Xanathar. The biggest mini I have, would that be a biggie, is I 3D printed a purple worm. I'm not done painting it because it took a ton of paint to make this, like, to get it this far. And I'm just not used to painting things at this big of a scale. So one of these days I'm going to finish painting it. But I 3D printed this in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chunks, and then this base. And I actually hollowed them out because I didn't want to use all of my resin to print this thing. Like it would use like half a bottle of resin. So I hollowed it out and then I filled it full of sand. So it weighs a lot. It probably weighs like a good solid pound. One of these days I'll do a yeah, it's really cool. So it's even more terrifying when you take it like this and then you put a guard up next to it. Like the purple worm is one of the, yeah, he's a chunky boy. They're one of the few gargantuan creatures in D&D. Like, and that's like the biggest size category. But yeah, he's like, I'm gonna get you with my sword, and the worm's just gonna be like, nom 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 nom. I've yet to be able to bust that out at the table yet, but I'm excited to do so. But again, it's a gargantuan creature, which means it's either a set piece that nobody is going to interact with and people are just going to be running away from it, or they have to be pretty high level to mess with it. My wet palette is drying up. I think I need to replace it. I think it's the purple worm and then the Tarrasque. And I want to say there's some, like, maybe a Kraken. And I think a dragon turtle are like the gargantuan beasts. Monsters in 5e. Oh, is the rock gargantuan? I thought it was just huge. I think you might be right. Yeah. I trust you. You're probably looking at it on online. I've never used a rock. I do want to use a rock sometime. I have used a dragon turtle in battle before, and I want a dragon turtle mini. Even though at that size I don't think you would technically call it a mini. A rock. Okay, so a rock is like this colossal bird. It's like a red falcon looking thing. Maybe falcon's not the right term, but they're just these huge birds. And they're terrifying. They'll like swoop down with their claws and pluck a ship out of the ocean. I don't know. I don't think. Okay, so maybe gargantuan. Is colossal bigger than gargantuan? Because I think ancient dragons are like the biggest normal size. Like there's size categories. There's, you know, diminutive, there's like tiny, small, medium, large, and then huge. But then there's like, okay, but so like the largest one, the largest size is just like anything over colossal is gargantuan. So whether it's bigger than a dragon or the size of a mountain, it's gargantuan. It's not like 100 feet to 200 feet or something like that. It's just like this biggest size or bigger. Like the moon. If you made the moon into a monster, it would be gargantuan. So it's like they're kind of all over the place. Like purple worms aren't really that big diameter wise, but they're gargantuan because they can be so long. Yeah, and so when you get to that size, it's like a lot of times the monsters just become a set piece. You know, it's like it's this big, huge thing, like a Tarrasque. It's just this big lumbering monster heading towards the city, and you gotta like the challenge is more like climbing up its leg, you know, and getting up to its shoulder so that you can cast a big spell to like blow up its brain, rather than swinging your sword at it and throwing fireballs at it or something. So you were looking them up. Are ancient dragons gargantuan? Because that doesn't seem right to me. All right, let's get some silver on here. Oh, haha. All right, I'm gonna have to look it up real quick. Let's swap this over here. Let's go to bestiary. Figured you could sort by size. I don't see size on here. Oh, there it is. Yeah, sure enough. Ancient dragons are up there. You're right. You're right. You're right. That is bigger than I thought. An astral dreadnought. Those things are huge. A brontosaurus. Ooh, big dinosaurs. Core spawn worm, dragon turtle, hydra, an iron scale hydra. The Kraken. Okay, the Kraken is on there. I'm not familiar with the Leviathan. That's in Mordenkainen's. A phoenix. Ooh. There's the rock. Okay. See, even a young purple worm is gargantuan, because it's like if it's this size or bigger, you know. You're right. You're right. You got it. Wow, I didn't realize that. I wonder if ancient dragons are just like on the smaller side of gargantuan. Maybe not. Who am I to tell? A gargantuan rug of smothering on the world. Yeah, gargantuan creatures are fun. I used a dragon turtle in one of the little one-shot games. Yeah, Tales from the Yawning Portal has a lot of remixed monsters. It'll have they have a lot of what are called low threat monsters, and it'll be like something really tough, but then they'll reduce the hit points, and maybe it's got damaged armor, so it's got like less armor class, and it doesn't use some of the worst attacks and stuff like that. And they do that so that you can throw it at lower level parties. So now I'm just putting some silver on here just to kind of differentiate some of these parts. Let's do the blade in silver on this sword. Just gonna make that a little lighter. Yeah, Tales from the Yawning Portal. Because it's like a bunch of low-level greatest hits quests to go on. Yeah, probably. I'd have to look at the stat block to see like what its actual dimensions are and stuff. But it'd probably smother a city. I was actually thinking that that might be something interesting to like, if you had a spell scroll and you could like conjure it and use it to like fight the Tarask, you could like have that to have that guy fight the Tarask for you. Yeah, so that kind of helps. Helps differentiate it a little bit. The wash will really help bring down some of the darker metal parts too. So let's get that on. The blade. CR2? That's weird. Maybe it's so big it can't smother you. So Ice Soul, have you ever considered DMing before? I know it's not for everybody, but man, it's the most fun, in my opinion. It can seem a little terrifying. Like, I totally get that. And I will admit that actually, even to this day, until I actually sit at the table and like roll some dice, I still get like really nervous when I DM. But it's mostly just juggling a lot of different things. It's mostly trying to stay on top of stuff. And if you can find a system, because there's a lot of them out there, that will help you just keep the important stuff at the ready, then the rest of the stuff falls in place. There's a really great criminally under popular guy on YouTube named Sly Flourish. And he wrote a book called The Lazy Dungeon Master. And it's all about preparing what you need, like just enough. Because one of the scary things about dungeon mastering, and like one of the inside jokes, is that you end up preparing so much stuff. Like you build this whole town and all the people in the town and their occupations and all their relationships with each other. Because, you want this town to be like living and breathing and real seeming, and like there's quests in the town and there's sneaky people doing sneaky stuff in the town for the players to do battle against, and they're going to stop them from whatever, right? you do all that stuff, and then the game starts, and the people are, your players are like, you know, I think we would rather go to the forest and pick berries. And you're like, well, crap, I didn't do anything in the forest. I made a town. Yeah, I'll have to remember that giant rug too. But yeah, so you're like, hey, they're just you know, they're going into the forest, and then, you know, all of those notes that you prepared, you could use them later, but you can't. It's not going to help you tonight, you know. And so you end up improvising a bunch of stuff, or, you know, that can seem very overwhelming. And so with the lazy dungeon master's philosophy, or like the method is that you prepare just enough to run like what the players might get into, and then you improvise the rest. And improvising can seem very daunting, especially if you are not a very imaginative person. But it's kind of like a muscle. You can, you know, if you work on it, it gets better with time. And you know, you can just improvise the things that you are good at improvising. Like, I'm really good at just coming up with characters and voicing them and dropping them into certain places. I'm pretty good with that. I'm also pretty good with like coming up with fantastic locations. Like if you go into a forest, what's an interesting thing in this forest? I'm pretty good with coming up with that kind of stuff on the spot. Or like what somebody would say in a certain instance. What I'm not good at with coming up on the spot is like maps. And so I will spend my time ahead of time making maps so that I have those. I'm also not good at coming up with like treasure and stuff. So when, you know, they beat the bad guys and they're supposed to get rewarded for it, I'm not really good at coming up with that kind of stuff. So I spend some time in my prep ahead of time I'll either pre-roll loot tables that you can get in the Dungeon Master's Guide or wherever, or I'll come up with some tables that I can just pull the piece of paper and roll the dice real quick, and then I have an answer. So it's like you prepare the stuff that you're weakest on, and then you don't prepare the stuff that you're strongest on. And that way it ends up, I'm going to put an edge highlight right here with some silver. That way you don't have to prepare as much, and you don't have to waste as much time. Like the general rule of thumb for dungeon mastering is about an hour of prep. 1 hour of prep for 1 hour of game time. So if you're going to be playing a 2-hour game, expect to put about 2 hours of prep. But I've gotten that down to about half an hour of prep per an hour of game time. And pretty consistently too. Another thing to remember is that you're not telling a story. When it comes to players and Dungeons and Dragons, they write the story. You don't write the story. When a Dungeon Master gets into their mind that they're writing a story, it can be very frustrating when the players don't play along. When the players decide that this bad guy is not important to them, they don't care about them. You know, the bad guy was going to go and destroy the city and they were supposed to rescue them. Well, you didn't think that when they went to that city that they were going to be, you know, get into a bar fight and end up just hating everybody in the city and everybody in the city hating them. And now when the bad guy comes to destroy the city, they're like, good. That place was stupid. So you're not writing their story. What you're doing as a dungeon master is you're putting them into tough spots. You're putting them into special situations and then letting them figure out how to get out of this mess. And you want to do it fair. You know, you don't want to put something that's going to instantly kill them, and that's going to be a bit of a challenge. But honestly, I throw terrible stuff at my players all the time, and they last. And it might just be my players, but like I've yet to actually kill a player, and sometimes I get super close and it's super scary. But they always make it for some reason. But yeah, that way you don't have to worry about getting them to go through the story and stick to the plot. The best ones are when they come up with something and then they ride all the way through it and they're invested, and then you take their ideas and you bounce them back on them. So if they have this cool idea of doing this, of getting into this bar fight, well, then your question is, how do I make this bar fight fun? How do I make it interesting? How do I, like, if they're wanting to get into a bar fight, how do I make this the coolest bar fight ever so that afterwards they're like, man, that was cool. Did you have that whole thing planned out? Like, that part where, the guards come in and it was right when the half-orc in the back finally snapped and he threw his mug and it hit the guard in the face right as he was coming through. And then and they were like, who started this? And everybody pointed at the half-orc, and we rolled deception checks, and then they ended up blaming it all on the half-orc, and then we just left laughing. Man, that was a hilarious time. That's D&D. If you can do that, you can do D&D. It's really not that hard. It sounds a whole lot more daunting than it actually is. Another bonus tip is if you're playing with players that are new, they're not going to know the difference. They're going to be so focused on their characters and what they think is cool that they're not going to even notice. And that's the thing, is that DMs don't like to admit it, and players lots of times don't like to admit it, but they're not as interested in our stuff that we come up with DMs as they like to admit. Like, our stuff is interesting, but it's players are kind of self-centered. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because, like, they're the heroes. Like, the things are going to revolve around them. Like, the scene of this movie is literally following them everywhere. Oh yeah, I've used that a couple times actually, where you're just falling through the sky. And you're like, well, if you hit the water, you're going to take 125 damage, or like whatever the max fall damage is. It's like 15 d6 damage or something like that. And guess what? They all made it. One of them, like, dimension doored down. A couple of them, like, made their acrobatics checks or whatever and took half damage. And then the guy who made it down was able to heal them. And, like, they always do it. And honestly, I'm just going to, like, peel a little bit back on that one, Jalapeno. I had no idea how you guys were going to survive that. I was like, they need to be roughed up a little bit before this big battle. Let's just drop them out of the sky. See what happens. And then they freaked out. But they made it. And it was awesome. And now he's telling you now because it was that memorable. Yeah, the Lazy Dungeon Master book is a really, really good read. He one of the principles that I use above all is to create a strong start. Like, the beginning of the game is one of the few times that you can actually control the game. The very start, when the Dungeon Master sits down and says, you're in the woods, right? And you start painting the scenery around them and what's happening. That's like one of the only times that you actually have control of the situation. Because when you say you're in the town and there's a tavern across the street and there's a procession of religious zealots that are going to sacrifice a girl, that, like, you have control of that because you just put that out in front of them. But whether they go to the tavern, whether they stop the zealots, whether they, stop the zealots and then still sacrifice the girl and then get the blessing of the evil god, that's all in their hands. And after you set the strong start, they're just reacting to you. You said it, they tell you what they want to do, and then you explain. And then it just loops and loops and loops and loops and loops. All right. So these guys look a little bit like Santa Claus. Got some Santa Claus red on there. Let's go ahead and wash them. How much time we got left? Ooh, we got 15 minutes. Let's get this on there. Get this show on the road. All right, so let's do... I think I'm going to do Seraphim Sepia on their gloves. Not to be confused with Cherubim Sepia. This is a wash. And let's see, we're going to pull out our Carosburg Crimson. This is our red wash. We're going to use Nuln Oil. This is my black wash. Use a lot of it. That's why I got the big one. And what else? Ooh, we got some leather on the belt. Let's make that... Let's do Seraphim Sepia on that too. We'll turn this white into, into like a darker leather. And then the leather will darken that one up. Actually, that's not going to be dark enough. We'll use Agrax Earthshade. This is like a darker brown wash. This is like a warmer reddish brown wash. Yeah, wash. I'll explain how it works in just a second once we get into this. And I think that's it. Yeah, so what a wash does is a wash simulates shadow. And it does that by creeping into all of the crevices. If you can take a screenshot, I'll give you a second. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000, bam. Pay attention to the little dimples in the chainmail here. Because what the wash is going to do is because remember, we're trying to make a small thing look like a big thing. If we put a watery paint on this stuff, it's going to bubble up. It's going to have surface tension, like a drop of water. So what this does is it has a little bit of stuff in it. I've made my own wash that has like a drop of dish soap. And what that does is it breaks the surface tension, makes it all ready. And this stuff, you just get it on your brush and you just smear it. You just slather it all over. And what it's going to do is it's going to drop into those cracks and crevices. If it doesn't have that surfactant in it, what it would do is it would just bubble up and sit on top, and you don't want that. Highlights go on top, shadows go in the cracks. And so this stuff is going to seep down into the cracks, and then it's going to dry, and it's going to create shadows. And so this is like, it's pretty easy because you just kind of smear it on. There is a little bit that you have to be careful. If it gets too thick and you get like a really thick blop, it can dry weird like a coffee stain, and it won't create the shadow effect that you want. So if that ever happens, you can dry your brush off and then use it to like dab it on it, a thick blop, and it'll like soak it up. There we go. But this is just going to get into all of these crevices, and it's going to make it look so nice. Like on that, when we get to that hand, you're going to see it. That hand's going to be looking mighty fine. See, it gets right into those cracks on the sword, right there. And see, now you can actually see it. This leather belt here, you might not be able to see it, but right in the center, there's like a little fold. You can't really see it right now. Once you get a wash in there, now you can see it. I'm going to drop a little bit on this belt buckle. And see, that's going to give that some definition. Another thing that it's going to do is that it is going to cover the whole, since it is translucent, it's going to cover all of the paint. So when you're painting, when you're base coating, just like blocking all of this stuff in, you do want to paint it a little brighter than what the end result is going to be, because the wash is going to slightly darken everything down. But normally you don't have to pay too much, you don't have to pay too much attention to it. Oh, see, look at that. See how that is like a big thick blop right there? That's not good. Because what that's going to do is it's going to dry at the edge of the pond first, and then it's going to create a little line, and then that pond is going to shrink, and it's going to be lighter in the middle than it is going to be on the outside. It's going to look like a coffee stain, like if you had a coffee mug on a paper towel. It's going to create a little ring where it's like darker around the outside. So what I did is I dried my brush off. And I can just stick it right in here, and it's going to go zoop and suck it up. That's better. We're almost done. We just have this. Just a little boot. Now another thing that I like to do with this, the washes don't work very well on super flat surfaces because there's no crevices to make shadows. But I do like to put them, like I'm going to put it on this shield, even though there aren't crevices. And I do that because a lot of times my paints are very chalky, like I'd mentioned before, and just putting this on will kind of add like a little bit of a smoother, creamy texture to it. In my opinion, it just makes it look more uniform. It makes it look like the rest of the parts that have been washed. But that's just a personal touch. Like if you notice, I'm not putting it on the sword blade. And I'm doing that intentionally because I want the gun metal to be darker than the silver. And so by not washing the silver parts, I'm making, and by washing the gunmetal parts, I'm making the silver look brighter. Here we go. And look at that. He's actually got like shadow on him. I'm actually going to go ahead and instead of doing all the black on each of the minis and then moving to the next mini, I'm going to do one of these minis all the way through at a time. So let's go ahead and get the Karasburg Crimson. And we'll wash the red. Now this is going to look nice. Cloth really benefits from this because it has a lot of folds. So like right there, you can see a little bit on that shadow there. But once you get this on here, see there's like all sorts of folds on here that this is going to accentuate. And I'm actually doubling up on my shadows a little bit. There is another technique that I use for shadows called Xenothal Highlighting. And we didn't really get to look at it much on this because I had already started painting the metal on this. But a Xenothal highlight, actually I have a mini here. If you notice, this guy, he's white, right? He's primed white. He's actually primed black. And what I do is I paint them in black, and then I take my airbrush and I spray down from the top, and it simulates light coming down on the top. And then what you do is when you're painting your base colors over everything, some of that light shines through the paint. And so when you're painting the red on the top of it, that red is a little lighter. And when you're painting red underneath, that red's a little darker because the black is shining through. And so instead of, you get some built-in shadows, and it aids in the shadowy illusion. Yeah, it's pretty neat. It does, like, if you want to do it really, really well, it does require an airbrush, and I'm not very good at an airbrush. I pretty much only use my little airbrush for Xenothal highlighting, but I actually have done some Xenothal highlighting with a paintbrush, where what I would do is I would, oops, that's too much. Is I would prime them in black, and then I would take white on my brush and just go toop, 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 toop. Kind of like dry brushing, but it's dry brushing in one direction, in the direction from the sun. Or where the sun would be. And it works okay. Like, it's better than nothing, in my opinion. But it's not nearly as effectual as with an airbrush. So don't let not having an, like if you ever get into painting, don't let not having an airbrush keep you from Xenothal highlighting, because it's really valuable and it creates a very, very good effect. See, those pants are starting, or that thing is starting to look good down there. This music's generating some really nice tones. I'm really liking this. This music is a bit of a labor of love. It's a Eurotrack synthesizer that I've been tinkering with for a long time, where you it's almost like programming electronics, and you plug patches into it, modules into one another, and tweak some dials and knobs and stuff, and it spits out these procedurally generated tones. So it's like, I don't really know what it's going to make. It's all procedurally generated. But I do that to get around the copyright. Okay, so now this is based in white here. So I'm going to go over the white with this Seraphim Sepia. And if you notice, it's going to seep into the cracks of his fingers. And where before you couldn't see fingers, now you can. See? Same thing over here. Oh no, I hit the little thing on the front. Didn't mean to do that. I kind of want to leave the white paint on the helmet so that it's nice and bright and shines through. And you can do different layerings of paints and washes. Like, if I wanted to, I could, paint these parts here on the swords a white, and then put that red wash on it, and it would be like a lighter red. Or I could put like a green wash on it, and it would be like tinted green, because it's almost like translucent tint. It's less like paint. Alright, and then this one's my Agrax Earthshade. This is like a darker brown. And we're going to hit the wood and the leather belt with this. There we go. That's a nice leathery color. And so the nice thing is that since it is just tinting it, you can use it on different colors, like I was saying with the green and the red. I can use this, and it's going to give some nice dark shadows on these wood scabbards. But then when I put it over on the belt, on the leather, it's going to make it nice and dark leathery colored. I used to just use Nuln Oil for everything. Nuln Oil is what we used on the chainmail, and that's like just the generic black. But I've found that it looks a little better if you at least try to match close to what the paint is. So, brown on brown, black on gray stuff, kind of reddish tones on flesh. It just helps. And there we go. There's our knight. And if you look, see the difference? It looks like it actually has shadows on his chainmail. And it doesn't look so flat, especially on the cloth. This stuff, like washes, are liquid talent. I always think that these minis look like junk until you put the washes on it. Like once you put the washes on it, it's like, yeah. And then after the washes is when I would normally do detailing. That's like when I would put the eyes on, because you don't want to wash over the eyes, because then you don't get that bright white from the white of the eye. So I would paint like the details on the shield, or put the eyes on, or any sort of stuff like that. And then I would go through and I would do dry brushing to give the highlights. You would do that afterwards because you're wanting to highlight it. You don't want those highlights darkened back down by the wash. Ooh, we got 1 minute left. I think my music's gonna run out here soon. I got 6 minutes. We'll wait for the music to stop. See if I can get this done in time. So close to the home stretch. I'm actually gonna go ahead and batch these ones. Personally, I find it more productive. Like I enjoy it more when I paint a whole mini from start to finish. But you get way more done if you like do all the red on all of the minis, and then all of the silver on all of the minis, and then all of the black. Assembly lining is just so much more efficient, but it's just not as fun. There's a part of the creative process that I really like, and just sticking with one mini, and I'll try a thing, and it lets me like deviate creatively from one to the other. But that's not good for things like like if you're painting a Warhammer army and you've got like 40 minis to paint, that's not going to work too well. It'll take you forever. Okay, so there's that. Let's go ahead and get the hands. That would be the Seraphim Sepia, not to be confused with Cherubim Sepia. Yeah, it's a really big difference. It makes all the difference in the world. Because that's the thing, like, light works differently on little things than it does on big things. I was playing Grounded the other day. Yeah, you were there, Jalapeno, when we were playing Grounded. Like, one of the cool things that they do in that game, it's like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids survival game, for those not aware. One of the things that makes that game look so cool, aesthetically speaking, is that they model the stuff to look small. So like the way that the light scatters through the blades of grass, where it has like the subsurface scattering where it almost glows translucently, because that's how it would look if you were really close to it. It's like a whole thing. All right, there's that. Let's go ahead and do our. Oh snap! I didn't do the hands on this other guy. I got into single mini mode. I can also kind of rush this because, I mean, they're just guards. The players are going to pick them up, look at them once and go, oh, look, that's neat, and then they're going to put them away. And then never touch them again because I'm the DM and I move the guards around. And they're going to be looking at them like 3 feet across the table. If you, like, when you're painting minis 3 feet across the table, you can paint googly eyes on them and they're not even going to notice. Now for the heroes, I like to spend more time because they're going to be handling them. They're going to like take them and look at them, and they're going to have like their own identity associated with this creature, with this character. And I'll probably do the same thing with like boss characters and stuff. But with just guards or like goblins or whatever, it don't really matter. Like there are going to be people that appreciate it, and they're going to be like, wow, look at you, went into all that detail, look at that attention to detail. But the question you have to ask yourself when making any sort of prop, because D&D 5e doesn't need minis to be played, when you're making any sort of prop, is that why are you doing it? You're doing it to enhance the play. You're doing it to make the game more fun. Having painted minis on a table on a map is more fun than just using little like D6s for your minis or using little plastic army men for your minis. Like, it's just more fun because it's more in theme, and there's like time and effort put into it, and I don't know, it's just more fun. But if you paint it really, really, really well, how much more fun are you adding to the game? Like, are they going to look at it for the same amount of time? Are they going to look at it a minute longer? Is it worth your time investment as a DM to spend an extra 45 minutes painting details onto a mini so that they can look at it and enjoy it more for 5 minutes? To me, that's a no. I would rather take that time. I would rather take that 45 minutes and come up with some more characters or make a new map or, more story ideas or other places that will generate more fun for them. Crazy magic items. Players love magic items. They're going to get way more fun out of a well thought out monster encounter or magic item than they are you spending 45 minutes highlighting and painting eyebrows onto a mini. Unless all of your players are artists. And there are games that are like that. So like, if they're art buffs and they're going to appreciate it, and every time you pull out the minis, you're gonna be like, oh man, that's so cool that you did that. And it's just if that is going to enhance their game, then invest in that. If you having like well drawn out maps doesn't impress them, then don't invest in that. Like, figure out what makes your players tick and what is going to enhance the enjoyment of the game, and spend your time on that. That's my dungeon master advice for the night. Oh, there goes the music. I'm gonna start that other song. Find out what they like, and find out what you really need to invest your resources as a dungeon master in, and put your time into that. And then improvise what you can, because you're gonna have to improvise at the table anyway. Things always go sideways. No plan survives contact with the players. Isn't that like the saying? No plan survives contact with the enemy. You can plan, but it's never going to go according to plan. There's also another good principle that says planning is essential. Plans are worthless, but planning is essential. So putting the time and thinking through the stuff is really essential, and it's good practice, but it's got to go off the rails, so be ready for that. And it's going to be better if it does go off the rails. All right, let's put that away. Now we got null oil. This is the one that is done. Yes. Put you in there. All right, let's slather some null oil on this guy. And then we'll call him good. I'm just not realizing, I don't think I put any wash on that first mini's helmet. Because he has these little eye slits right underneath the helmet that are now showing up as black, but I don't think I put that on the other one. That was way too much. So instead of drying my brush off and going back there and sopping it up, another thing that you can do, because if I do that, I'm essentially wasting wash, is I can just be really quick about it and get all of the wash off of the brush and onto other parts, and then go back and suck it up, and then use that to paint in other places. There we go. Nice. Let's get this guy's helmet before I forget. Yeah, sure didn't. And last one. Well, thank you so much, guys, for hanging out with me tonight. I really enjoyed having you here. Really enjoyed talking. Having somebody to talk to. Like I said, I've been painting for a number of years, and I've kind of always done it on my own, by my lonesome, and I've really enjoyed streaming this past while because I get to talk to cool folks like you guys. Get to talk about D&D. Why I love this hobby so much. I hope I didn't bore you. I hope my video was entertaining and useful. And I hope that you go out and play more D&D. It's a great pastime, especially now with our world is really weird right now. Being an adult, it's really hard to find places to socialize and build relationships and whatnot, especially since the dawn of the internet. D&D is a great way to build friendships and to spend time with people and make real connections. Keeps you off of social media. It's good stuff. And I forgot to do the scabbard on this guy. Did I get him? Yep. Alrighty. Yeah, I had a blast too, Isol. I really appreciate you hanging out. I stream on Tuesdays and Saturdays. I It's just like a thing that I'm starting. I've never really had a schedule when doing these, and these guys turned out great. On Tuesdays are funsies days, which means I just kind of like do whatever is on my list, catching up on stuff like this, or like making monsters and stuff for my game on Thursday. But then Saturdays, I'm actually starting up a project. I'm going through the entire monster manual, and my goal is to paint a monster of every monster in the monster manual. And that's been super fun going through. I think next week we're going to be painting this Azure, because it's in the A's. But I've also got some really great stuff here. I've got a Chimera on my list. I started him a little while ago. I have a pair of axe beaks that we're going to be going through. They're on the list. This one is intimidating to me. It's been painted, it's been primed and Xenothal highlighted for a while. It's a Remoraz, and I'm very intimidated by it. I might actually have to. This is one of the ones that I Xenothal highlighted with a paintbrush. I might have to actually use an airbrush on him, and that's kind of intimidating. I've never done it before. But yeah, like I've had him for so long that the like his head broke off, like his antennas. I had to cut his head off and 3D printer replacement and repair him. Same thing with like the little spines here. He's been around for a long time, and I would. He's like my unicorn. I would love to get him painted and out of the way. Yeah, it's a lot of legs. This is a lot of mini. I've got a. Oh, let me just grab this hole. I magnetize these things, so I can move them around easy. But I got a couple basilisks on the docket, some demons, some spike devils, a bunch of these bandits. These guys are going to be fun. It's kind of like the opposite of the guards. I wanted a big variety so that when they're ambushed by bandits, I got this dark mantle. He's on a magnetic base. Not sure I liked that decision. A couple of duodrons. And I freshly painted or printed these. I've got an Androsphinx and a Gynosphinx. I need to make bases for those yet. I haven't made bases. And then my most recent model is an Ankylosaurus, because it's in the A's, and I'm starting from the top and I'm going down. I'll probably skip around a lot, but that one's probably gonna be pretty straightforward. But yeah, thanks again for hanging out. I had a blast. I really enjoyed having you guys hang out with me while I'm painting. Y'all be good, and I hope to see you Saturday. Bye.